So hello there, I'm Amok Kumar, and with me today is Felicity Carter. And as I'd like to refer to her for the day as the face behind Miss Carter. So she's a former astrologer, she's been a part of the wine market, she's a reader, she's also a writer. She's written multiple articles, some of which include articles about the wine market, animals, travel stories, and of course the famous article about her time as an astrologer. So greetings Felicity, and thank you for making your way in.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I don't exactly remember as to when I stumbled upon the article about your time as an astrologer. I think it was back in January this year. But as soon as I did, I just was truly intrigued and fascinated by the way it was and the story that transpired. And I think I jumped in and started to work on the screenplay right away. Although I had loads of screenplays piled up, I think I jumped right into this because it created a sense of intrigue, and it's really fascinating to emulate a certain character, a real incident or a story on the screen. While I was working on the screenplay, I think I had loads of questions going on in my mind. So I'll filter out a few questions from all of those and ask you quite a few for the day. The first question I want to ask you is, what happened after astrology? What transpired? Where did you head next? And how was the transition period like?
Oh, well, I was doing it while I was studying music. And so basically my music, my music degree came to an end. And then I went and had to find work. And that was a very difficult period. So I was a period in Australia where I graduated just as a lot of the work disappeared. So I took a day job writing brochures for a wine company while I was doing all of that, and I was really busy. So and also I'd sort of I kept doing it for a little while. I used to the business I worked for used to run functions for corporate functions where they'd have tarot card readers, and I'd sometimes go and do that because the money was great. But gradually, it just fell out of my life as I moved on.
All right. So it was the wine industry right after the astrology phase.
I did other things in between. So, although I report on wine, I'm actually a journalist. So I think of
Right.
myself as media rather than as part of wine. And so I've reported on other things as well, like science and funerals and dogs and all sorts of things.
Okay. All right. Fun. So, as someone who was part of the astrology field, is there an incident or two from then which really holds a huge recall value in your mind and really stands out when you think about it, but didn't really make its way into the article that you wrote?
Oh, lots and lots. There were so many of them. I think when I studied astrology, I spent a year going to night classes with a friend of mine, and there was a very charismatic and very famous Australian astrologer who was teaching it. And I think looking back, what was interesting was how dogmatic he was. That you've got this system which is doesn't really work. It's sort of based on your imagination in some ways, and he was very dogmatic. That he would say something about somebody's chart, and they would say that's not true, and he would say yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. And
Ah,
so he, so always stands out in my mind. But I tell you one that always got me was this
okay.
girl came in. I was reading her chart, and and I was very interested in medieval astrology at the time. So I was trying to interpret everybody's charts according to what the medieval people would have done. And she had this thing in her chart that the medieval people would have said meant she was a goldsmith or involved in gold in some way
Hmm.
or precious metals. And so I said to her, are you in jewelry? Are you in fashion? And she's like, no, 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 no. And so at the end, and she thought I had a terrible reading. And at the end, she got up and I said to her, look, do you mind if I ask you what you actually do? And she said she worked in the silverware department of a really major department store all day, every day. So
That's ironic. Right, right. I think they step in with premeditated thoughts or beliefs already, but then they want you to favor or cater to that. But when you don't, you're all wonky about it.
people come and tell you about your life. I mean, we've all seen this. Sometimes you, me, and the gatepost can tell what's going wrong in their life. That they're making a really obviously bad decision, particularly around romance. And you can gently suggest to them that maybe the signs is that person isn't their soulmate, and they just listen. They'll disagree. They have to find it out for themselves.
No, absolutely. Well, that's you being someone who's worked in multiple domains of the society and you've explored a lot of things out there. I'm keen to know as to how a typical day looks like for Felicity Carter.
For me, oh well, I work from home, and so my day is the morning is spent with drinking tea, trying to trying to scold myself into going into the office and stuff.
I'm a coffee person. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, well I do that too. So I start with tea and then I go out for coffee and
All right.
basically telling myself all the reasons why I can't sit down at the computer right now. And then the rest of my day is a mix between working frantically because I did a good job of telling myself to procrastinate and spending time on Zoom calls. And I do, apart from that, I do a lot of travel for work. So I'm out at the airport a lot, going places and regions.
So do you travel a lot or do you stay at home a lot? What takes the upper hand?
I travel. So I've just come back from 2 weeks in South Africa, and before that I was home for 2 weeks, and before that I was in Italy for 2 weeks. And I was supposed to, in between that, I was supposed to go to France, but I got COVID, so I had to stay at home. But I'm not traveling again for a couple of months, and then I'm going to New Zealand, Australia, and Hong Kong. So I do a lot of travel. Well, travel's lovely when you're on holiday, but when you're doing it for work, it's not so much fun.
I haven't had that experience yet, so I can't really say anything about it. But when I do, possibly not so much fun.
So you're a filmmaker. Is that your full-time job?
I mean, I'm a student at the moment, so it's pretty much part-time. But I do wish to make it full-time as I progress further.
And what are you studying?
I'm studying Bachelor's in Technology.
Okay, brilliant.
Right.
That's a good job.
So I'm still in my first year. I have got an exam tomorrow, but I'm doing this at the moment.
Oh my goodness. So you're procrastinating too. You shouldn't be doing this. You should be studying.
Cheers to that.
All right. Spirit. Okay.
I've made just a couple of short films prior to Moscato being my third one. So still gaining that experience that I wish to moving further.
I have to say, I think she's got a much better flat than I do. I was watching it last week in real estate.
Now that we've gotten rid of a few supposedly serious questions, I've noticed a hysterical phenomenon in the recent past, all right? So all of the people, as all of the astrologers out there, or people of that field, really despise the word astrologist.
Don't use the word astrologist. Absolutely not.
All right. So as far as research goes, both astrologer and astrologist mean pretty much the same. There are a lot of nuances.
You will have astrologers bringing down curses on you and the next 3 generations of your family if you do that. Oh, it's just a really ugly word. It's not the correct word. I don't know where it came from, but the term is and has always been astrologer. And astrologist, it's one of those ugly modern words. It's like you don't talk about, some people don't talk about marketers, they talk about marketeers. And it's just a stupid word, and it's not correct. And astrologers are generally quite proud of being astrologers, and so they don't want to be some, weirdo modern version of what they are. So definitely astrologer.
All right, because I did go an extra mile to research about this and I couldn't find a single difference between both of them. They could be used in the same context, but again, astrologers hate it. I don't know if this is the reasoning, but is it because it sounds like a doctor's designation, a gynecologist, and there's a psychologist?
No, it's just because it's wrong. It's just wrong, and somehow it's been adopted widely, but it also has a very modern ring to it. You're like astrologist, proctologist. It's like whereas astrologer is the correct historic term. And actually, history is really important to professional astrologers. They really like the fact that they exist in this thing that has existed for thousands of years. So that I think that's part of it too.
All right, just talking about Miss Carter now for a bit. I spent quite some time writing the screenplay, and while I was doing that, of course, I was trying to bring a fictitious taste to it while also sticking true to the nature of the story. So throughout the phase, I could understand the intent. I was trying to comprehend what was going in the story and everything that transpired in a linear apple pie order. But I think one thing that I missed out on is that I couldn't personally get in touch with you prior to the screenplay writing or even filming process for that matter. So I didn't know how your characteristics, your behavioral mannerisms, or the way you react to certain circumstances are. So I think me building Filoni was completely based on what I could understand from the story and what I thought could be apt with respect to the story and also me serving the masses. So now that you watched the short film, how similar or different do you think Felicity and Filoni are?
Completely different. For a start, she's got a driver. So like I said, I really envy this character. She was obviously a lot more successful than I was. And she's got a great real so you've done an idealized version of me, so well done.
Well, that was a part of it. I think story building. The driver was necessary.
Well, I'll tell you something else. I would never have allowed somebody into my home. When you do this, you are dealing quite often with people who are unpredictable. Most people who come and pay money to see you are middle class people having fun, but sometimes you see some people who are a bit scarier, and I would never, ever, ever, ever have allowed those people into my home.
So I missed the mark there, but I could serve the masses, so I think that's okay.
Yes, you have to make these artistic choices.
Of course, of course. I think I just had to build a little more drama because in the story, it all took place at the place where everyone barged in and used to read their cards. I think to build a little more tension, I had to have a different setting for it altogether. All right. So do you read a lot?
I do. I read a great deal. Yes. Yeah, I do. It's a problem. I keep accumulating books, and I've got a storage space in Sydney that's full of books.
I mean, it's wrong of me to ask that question looking at your background, but I just did.
Oh well, none of this is books. This is all folders full of tax documents. So
They're files. All right, all right.
yeah. And my boyfriend's DVDs, but outdated DVDs. But no, in another room, I do have a lot of books. Yeah.
What genre do you love the most?
Oh, I read a wide variety of things. I read a lot of contemporary fiction, literary fiction, but I read a lot of nonfiction. So I'm about to start a book on something called the Haber-Bosch process, which is how modern fertilizers were created. So and before that, I read a book on what did I read a book on somebody who was a doctor in the Syrian civil war. So as long as it's interesting, I'll read anything.
I do read quite some as well, but I think I just have a predilection for movies in comparison to books. So it's minimal of books and more of movies for me.
Well, a lot of people are like that now, especially one person I interviewed said, "Why would I read a book? You can't speed it up 1.5 times the way you can with YouTube." I was like, "Oh my god."
There's one more question that I want to ask you. For all of the people out there who are juggling between career choices, and there are so many people who just don't know what that one domain for them is. So they're always convoluted in their mind, and it's always a confusion that is a constant in their minds. So you, as someone who's, again, worked in multiple domains of the society, who better than you to give them a small piece of advice or guiding?
Oh, my piece of advice is if you're faced with multiple choices is don't worry too much about your choice. Just jump in. Action is always better than paralysis. So if you don't know what to do, just take something that looks reasonable and you'll find out pretty soon if you can't stand it. And if you can't stand it, change. But most people have this idea that, you've got to have passion for your career and you've got to love it. And they make a choice based on what they love. But actually, it's the other way around. Sometimes you start doing things and it's only when you start doing it and you start to be really good at it that you really fall in love with it. So I've interviewed people who've gone into jobs like sewage and, like funeral directors. And you think, well, those are horrible jobs, but they actually love the job, but they didn't discover they loved it until they became good at it. So sometimes I think don't worry about it too much. Just most important, never choose to be poor. That's really important.
So you're suggesting that rather than just trying and researching and finding the place for you, you just discover it. Just do what you have to and just stumble upon it.
We have different words, right? We have the word vocation, which is if you have a vocation, you know who you're supposed to be. There are people who have a vocation for medicine and they can't do anything else, or people who have a vocation to be an actor and they will go through any amount of poverty and hardship because that's who they are. Most people don't have a vocation. Most people will be very happy being, the thing that makes you happy at work is being competent at it, being really good at it and knowing that you're doing a good job. And being reasonably well paid for it. And there's a lot of things that you can do that you will never expect that once you learn how to be good at it, you can find it a very satisfying career. So if you don't have a vocation, and most people don't worry about it. Just choose whatever's in front of you and learn to be good at it.
That's how it is, because a lot of people come to me and they say, I have no talent in any of the fields. I just ask them to try and do what they are doing at the moment and try to do it better than they did yesterday, and maybe they'll develop a sense of adornness towards the same.
Mostly talent is something that you develop. You know what I mean? Like people who, I've met people who've come up with incredible inventions and they didn't start out as inventors. It's just they knew the field well enough to see that there was a problem that needed to be solved. And that's how things work. You don't go, I'm going to be a genius inventor. You move along, and then one day you go, that problem needs to be solved, and I'm the only person that knows how to solve it. And then the next thing you know, you got $1 million patent.
So did you just start off by knowing that you're good at astrology and you're good at being a journalist, or did you jump in and test yourself?
No. I got into astrology because I had a friend of mine, and it was her stepfather who was this famous astrologist. So I went along, and actually I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then other people began to want readings and things like that, and they all told me that I was really good at it, which looking back I think was just because they wanted a free reading. You know, and so things reinforce themselves. You know, in life sometimes you try and do things, and everyone will tell you, yeah, it was good, with no enthusiasm. But when other people go, oh, that was great, then you do more of that because you want more social approval, and you know, you improve and stuff. So
Most certainly.
you know, all of these things are a push and pull between your decisions and how other people react. So it's really important not to be too rigid. I mean, you have to have plans. You have to know where you're going. You have to study and make those sorts of choices. But once you've done that, don't be too rigid. Just see what happens. You know, like, the amazing thing about the world we live in is you can make mistakes, and they're not crushing. You know, in the past, if you made mistakes, particularly around career, that was it. You were finished. You know, that's not true anymore. You can reinvent yourself. And so the worst thing to be is a dilettante, where you're doing a bit of this and dropping it and doing a bit of that. But actually, if you find something, whatever you do, just learn to be good at it, and doors will begin to open.
I think we all are perpetrators at some point, but we get to where we are at some point. What next for you? What do you wish to do moving further? Of course, you're a part of a lot of things already, but is there something new you want to approach? What's next?
I've decided to improve my maths. So at the moment, I'm taking an online maths course. I want to understand data better. So that's my current hobby. is trying to remind myself of how I did algebra many years ago.
Oh, good, damn, absolutely. I'm doing that at the moment. I don't know if I'll revisit math 30 or 40 years down the lane.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll stave off dementia if I if I can make my brain work a bit harder. Yeah, it's funny. I really hated maths when I was at school, and actually now sometimes if I'm procrastinating, I log on and do equations, and actually I find it quite interesting in a way I didn't when I was younger.
I think back then it was all about examinations and getting through it, through studying your subjects. But when you do it with will, and if you wish to do it, I think it's a lot more fascinating than it was.
Well, also, I actually did a bunch of interviews with people on the question of why. So what happens with the difference between girls and boys in mathematics is, at the age of about 14, girls start to drop out of maths. Their maths scores start to decline, and there's a lot of research about why that is. You know, are girls just not inherently as good at maths as boys? And it seems like one of the things is at that point, boys will go, oh, well, maths is just getting harder, I better do some work. Whereas girls will go, oh, this is proof I'm not good at mathematics, I'm going to stop doing it. And if you can get girls to force them through that thing, by a couple of years later, they'll discover that they really like mathematics. And so I've actually taken that to heart. Now when I'm doing stuff and I think, oh, I've got that wrong, I don't go, I'm bad at maths. I go, oh, I better go and work out where
go for it again. All right. I mean, I'll have to look up statistics for that, men being better or worse than women in math. But again, for that, I'll have to go back to math again, statistics.
That's right.
So I think that'll be it. Thank you so much for doing this.
I hope your film is a great success.
Thank you so much. And I think I'll give a part of it to you as well, because your story truly fascinated me into writing what I did.
Thank you so much. It's been great to meet you. Thank you very much. And I hope your film and your subsequent films are great successes.
Right. Thank you so much. And likewise, I wish you all the best as well moving further.